The village whispered her name in hushed voices, never daring to speak it above a murmur. Veyna, the woman of fire and frost, the healer and the destroyer, the twin-flamed sorceress whose magic danced on the edge of salvation and ruin. Legends claimed she was born beneath a blood moon, cradled by the wind itself, her eyes shimmering like molten silver. The moment she took her first breath, the sky split apart, one half burning, the other cloaked in ice. Some called it an omen. Others called it a warning. No one truly understood Veyna. Some sought her out in desperation, their hands trembling as they begged for her healing touch. Others fled at the mere sight of her, fearing the whispered stories of those who had crossed her and turned to dust before they could scream. It was said that when Veyna's right hand touched the flesh of the wounded, their pain melted away, bones mended, and life rekindled in even the most broken bodies. But if she chose to raise her left hand, oh, the horror! A single flick of her fingers could strip the warmth from a man's veins, turning him into an empty husk before his shadow even hit the ground. She was a goddess in her own right. A force beyond the gods. A thing of beauty and terror. One evening, as the sun dipped behind jagged peaks, a lone traveler stumbled into her domain, a forest where the trees bowed to her presence, their leaves whispering secrets in a forgotten tongue. He was a warrior, his armor cracked, his face a canvas of dried blood and exhaustion. Veyna stepped from the mist like a phantom, her flowing robes shimmering between light and shadow. "Why have you come?" she asked, her voice neither welcoming nor cruel, just a whisper of possibility. The warrior fell to one knee, gasping. They took her." Veyna tilted her head. "Who?" "My sister," he breathed. "The ones who call themselves the Order of Hollow Light. They came in the night, burned my village, and dragged her away. Please." His voice broke. "I'll give you anything. Just bring her back." She stared at him, expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and placed her right hand on his forehead. Heat and ice surged through his body at once, a firestorm and a blizzard locked in an eternal dance. His wounds vanished. The exhaustion fled from his limbs like a frightened animal. Veyna withdrew her hand and spoke, her voice like silk over steel. "Take me to them." The Order of Hollow Light did not fear much in this world. They worshipped a single truth, balance through purity, believing that the world must be rid of those tainted by unnatural power. To them, Veyna was the greatest blight. A creature that should not exist. So when the first sentry saw her approaching the fortress, he laughed. "You shouldn't have come here, witch." Veyna simply lifted her left hand. The air turned to ice. The sentry's breath froze mid-exhale. Then, without a sound, he shattered like fragile glass, his body crumbling into a mist of frost and bone. The fortress burned and froze in equal measure that night. Flames licked the walls while ice crept through the stone like veins of death. Veyna moved through the chaos like a shadow given form, her hands wreathed in destruction and mercy alike. Some men begged for their lives, she let them live, their bones knitting back together even as they sobbed. Others raised their weapons, she did not grant them the same kindness. At the heart of the fortress, she found the girl. Shackled in silver chains, her eyes wide with terror. Veyna reached out. Her right hand glowed. The chains melted away, as if they had never been. The girl gasped, staring at her in awe. "Are you a goddess?" Veyna considered this. "No," she said finally. "I am whatever the world needs me to be." But as she turned to leave, something stirred in the darkness. A presence. A force. And for the first time in centuries, the sorceress felt something unfamiliar curling around her spine. A whisper. A warning. Something was watching. And it did not fear her. Veyna stood still, her senses sharpening like a blade honed to perfection. The presence was not mortal. It was ancient, woven into the very fabric of the night itself. The shadows deepened around her, coiling like serpents. The girl gasped, clutching Veyna's sleeve. "Something is here." Veyna lifted her left hand, ready to unleash frost upon the unseen force, but a voice slid through the air like a dagger wrapped in silk. Sorceress of the twin flames, you have been expected. The torches along the fortress walls flickered, dimming as if their fire feared to burn in the presence of this entity. The air thickened, pressing down on them, and the shadows began to move, not cast by light, but slithering of their own will. From the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall, wrapped in black robes that shifted like smoke. Its face was obscured beneath a hood, but its eyes burned with cold fire, two gleaming voids of endless night. Veyna did not flinch. "I do not care what you expect," she said, her voice smooth but edged with warning. "You stand in my way." The figure chuckled, the sound deep and layered, as if 100 voices whispered through it. "Your power is great. But it is incomplete." Veyna narrowed her eyes. "Is that so?" The figure raised a hand, and the fortress trembled. The stone beneath them cracked, black tendrils slithering from the fractures like ink spilling through the earth. The bodies of the fallen warriors, those she had frozen, those she had burned, moved. They rose. The shattered, the scorched, the broken. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and they turned toward her with stiff, jerking movements. The girl screamed. They were dead. Veyna's jaw tightened. "They still are." She raised both hands at once. Flame and ice erupted in perfect harmony. The air howled as one side of the fortress was consumed in searing white fire, the other swallowed in frost so deep that reality itself seemed to crack. But the figure did not move. It simply stood there, untouched, watching her with those impossible eyes. Then it spoke. "You wield fire and frost, but you do not know their true purpose." Veyna's magic did not wane, but something stirred in her mind, a flicker of something forbidden. She took a step forward, unafraid. "And what is their purpose, Shade?" The figure's voice was a whisper against the bones of the world. "To heal and destroy, yes. But also to create and unmake. You are not a sorceress, Veyna. You are a key. And I am here to unlock you." A pulse of darkness surged outward, swallowing everything in sight. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Veyna felt fear. The pulse of darkness hit Veyna like a collapsing sky. The world twisted, stretching and folding, and for a moment, she felt herself being unwoven, as if her very essence was being unraveled thread by thread. The fortress, the girl, the rising dead, all of it vanished. She was somewhere else. A great abyss stretched before her, filled with shifting, liquid shadows. Above, the sky pulsed, not with stars, but with burning eyes, thousands of them watching, judging, waiting. Veyna clenched her fists, fire and frost flickering at her fingertips. "You will regret this." The figure emerged from the abyss as if it had always been there. No longer just shadow, but something solid, something real. Its robes had transformed into a living darkness, tendrils of ink swirling around it like a second skin. The two burning voids where its eyes should be fixed upon her. "You misunderstand, Veyna. This is not an attack. This is an awakening." She spat at the ground. "I have no need for riddles." The figure's hand lifted, palm open. In the center of it, something glowed, a symbol, ancient and pulsing, one half wreathed in fire, the other in frost. The sight of it sent a violent shudder through her bones. Something deep inside her stirred. Something old. "You know what this is," the figure murmured. "Even if you do not remember." Veyna's breath came sharp. "A trick. No. A truth that was taken from you." And suddenly, she remembered. A time before memory. Before the world was bound in its current shape. She stood in another place, another age, another existence entirely. Not as Veyna. Not as the sorceress of fire and frost. But as something greater. She had wielded power beyond healing, beyond destruction. She had made and unmade. She had been the architect of stars, the sculptor of worlds. She had burned empires to shape them anew. She had frozen time itself to preserve what must not die. And then, she had been betrayed. A council of cowards. A betrayal sealed in blood and chains. They had feared what she was, what she could do, and so they had torn her apart. They had unmade her. They had cast her down into the frail shell of mortality, leaving her with nothing but fragments, whispers of power, glimpses of forgotten truth. But now it returned. Veyna staggered, gasping. She was back in the abyss, but her body, her power, felt different. Stronger. The figure stepped closer. You were never meant to be what they made you, it said. You were never meant to be bound by the laws of this world. Veyna's heart pounded. Fire and frost flared around her, but now it was more than just flame and ice. It was creation. It was annihilation. She could feel the shape of the world, the very fabric of existence trembling under her fingertips. The figure knelt before her. Become what you were. Veyna smiled. And the abyss began to burn. The abyss trembled. The countless watching eyes above blinked, not in fear, but in recognition. A thing long forgotten had woken. Veyna's fire did not burn like mortal flame. It consumed in a way that rewrote existence itself. The abyss, meant to be eternal, cracked beneath its touch. The figure did not move. It remained kneeling, watching her with reverence. You were the first to shape the world, it said. Now, you will be the last to decide its fate. Veyna tilted her head. The power rushing through her was intoxicating. It was not just fire and frost anymore. It was the force of becoming, the ability to command reality itself. She could reshape the world. Erase it. Build something new. Something better. The thought sent a shiver of delight through her. And what, she asked, if I choose to end it all? The figure smiled, actually smiled, as if it had been waiting for the question. Then it will end. No begging. No desperate plea for mercy. Only certainty. Veyna stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet forming and disintegrating at once. Who are you? She asked. What part do you play in this? The figure slowly rose. I am the keeper of the forgotten. The title hummed through the air, vibrating against the very core of her being. It was not a name, it was a purpose. A thing that had existed alongside her, bound in shadow, waiting for her return. Veyna exhaled, considering. And why bring me here now? The keeper gestured to the abyss around them, to the eyes above. Because they know. The world has shifted. Your prison is failing. Soon, others will remember what you once were. And they will try to stop you. She laughed. A true, deep laugh that shook the abyss itself. Let them try. The keeper's expression did not change. They will not come alone. And then, with a flick of its hand, the abyss ripped open, revealing glimpses of a world that should not exist. Veyna's laughter died on her lips. What she saw was not her world. Not the one she had shaped before her fall. It was a world remade. Her enemies were not just waiting. They had already changed everything. She clenched her fists, the power inside her burning brighter, colder, stronger than ever before. The keeper bowed slightly. Shall we begin? Veyna smiled. Yes. And with a single step, she left the abyss behind. The moment Veyna stepped through the rift, reality snapped back into form around her. She stood at the edge of an unfamiliar world, one that should have been hers, but was now a twisted mockery of her creation. The sky was an unnatural golden hue, thick with spiraling clouds that moved against the wind. Towering structures of polished obsidian and ivory rose in every direction, their surfaces etched with pulsing runes of power, not hers, but belonging to those who had usurped her throne. Beneath her, the streets pulsed with life, not ordinary mortals, but beings sculpted from magic itself. Their eyes gleamed like captured stars, their bodies a fusion of flesh and energy. They walked as gods, speaking a language that was once hers but had been altered, rewritten to remove her name. Veyna felt the weight of her absence. They had not simply erased her memory. They had rewoven the very fabric of existence to ensure she had never been. The air tasted of betrayal. The keeper materialized beside her, his cloak shifting like a living shadow. Do you understand now? Veyna clenched her fists, watching the world unfold before her. This is not mine. No, the keeper agreed. They remade it in their image. In their perfection. His voice darkened. And in doing so, they have weakened it. Veyna turned, eyes narrowing. Weakened? The keeper lifted a hand, and a ripple of magic surged outward. For a brief moment, the golden sky flickered, revealing something beneath it. A cage. An unseen barrier woven into the fabric of the realm, holding the world in a delicate balance. Veyna's pulse quickened. The fools. They had not destroyed her power. They had merely buried it, weaving their own magic around it like vines choking an ancient ruin. And now, it was cracking. How long until it collapses? She asked. The keeper's hollow eyes burned. Soon. They have spent centuries maintaining this false world. But they were never its true architects. The foundation is rotting beneath their perfection. Veyna smiled. And when it crumbles? The keeper's voice was almost reverent. You will rise. A wind stirred through the streets, brushing against the godlike beings who roamed this realm. None of them looked up. None of them sensed the presence of the woman who had once forged the very ground they walked upon. But one did. A figure standing upon a great obsidian balcony, draped in robes of liquid silver, turned their head sharply. Eyes met across the impossible distance. Their face was familiar. Too familiar. Veyna's breath caught. She had known them once. Before the fall. Before the betrayal. Before they had chosen to side against her. The figure's lips parted slightly in recognition, then in horror. Veyna smirked. And in that moment, the first crack in the sky appeared. The crack in the sky shuddered, splitting the golden illusion apart like fragile glass. A ripple of silence passed through the streets below, an eerie stillness as the inhabitants felt something shift, something they had long forgotten. Then came the sound. A deep, resonating groan that tore through the foundations of their perfect world. Buildings trembled, the runes on their surfaces flickering like dying embers. The once glorious sky above turned a sickly shade of ashen gray, the golden glow bleeding out like a dying sun. The figure on the balcony, the one who had once stood beside Veyna before her fall, vanished in a blink, reappearing in the air above the city. A silver spear materialized in their grasp, radiating a power that had once rivaled her own. No. Their voice boomed, laced with command and panic. This world is ours now. You cannot claim what is already perfected. Veyna tilted her head, watching them as if they were a stubborn child refusing to admit defeat. Perfect. She echoed, raising her right hand. Then tell me, old friend, why does it feel so hollow? With a flick of her wrist, flames roared to life, curling in the air like a living thing. The structures of obsidian and ivory groaned under its touch, not burning but unraveling, revealing glimpses of what had once been her world, buried beneath layers of falsehood. Screams rose from the streets as the beings below felt something they had never known before: imperfection, chaos, fear. The spear wielder gritted their teeth. You were erased for a reason. You are not meant to exist. Veyna laughed, stepping forward. The sheer force of her presence bent the air around her, warping reality with every breath. And yet, here I am. She lifted her left hand. Frost surged outward. Not the cold of death, but the cold of remembrance, of frozen time breaking free from its forced stillness. The perfect world fractured, memories bleeding back into existence. Statues of false deities crumbled into dust. The runes that had sealed her power flickered, then shattered. And finally, the chains on her soul snapped. Veyna became whole. The golden beings fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the truth poured back into them, not just of what they were, but of what had been taken from them. The figure above let out a breath, half fear, half sorrow. If you do this, they whispered, you will unmake all that we have built. Veyna lifted her eyes to the broken sky, where the cage that had held her power for eons was now nothing more than drifting dust. Her voice was soft. Then I will build again. She clapped her hands together. The world shattered. Light and darkness clashed, fire and frost merged, and the perfect order of the usurpers collapsed in a single moment of raw, absolute creation. When the blinding light faded, the ruins of the old world lay before her. Not perfect, not pristine, but real. And standing in its center was her throne, untouched by time. Veyna stepped forward, running her fingers over its surface. It remembered her. And at long last, she remembered herself. The figure behind her dropped to one knee, eyes dark with grief and awe. You were always meant to rule. Veyna smiled. Yes. And as she took her rightful place upon the throne, the world knelt before its true creator once more.